I was the only girl that my CAD teacher had ever had in his CAD class in high school, which was kind of fun too, because I was then teaching all the guys how to do it right.
Go with what you like and don't necessarily follow the trends. Don't feel like, like you mentioned green granite. Don't feel bad if you like something.
Many times what I find is if you lean into something that you don't like, but you have to keep, it usually works out a lot better if you embrace it than if you try to fight it.
Sometimes that's hard for people though.
It is. It's very hard.
Yeah, and there's a difference between, an interior designer that went to school for it and is, licensed and studied and did all that, as opposed to somebody who's like just a decorator.
Right.
And I don't think a lot of people understand that aspect of it either.
True. She insisted that I go, and so I went. And I had a lovely time, but of course she told everybody in the neighborhood who came that I was the designer that helped her with that house. And so I never got another job in that neighborhood again.
Oh no. Hello everyone and welcome to Design Discussions with Nadine. My name is Nadine and today I have another lovely interior designer as my guest, Sherry Millien. How are you?
I am good. How are you?
It's very good to see you again. Thank you so much for sitting with me and talking. And as usual with interior designers, we're going to talk all things design, so I'm excited to get going.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. So I want to talk about initially right now for your experience as an interior designer. What made you go into interior design? What drove you in that direction?
Okay.
And let's talk a little bit about that.
Let's talk a little bit about that. So I have 27 years of experience. I graduated in 1996 from Oklahoma State University. I don't have where I change the rooms every other day like that, like a lot of people you were here. But I grew up wanting to be creative. My grandfather gave me a book on how to draw what you see and told me when we were camping one day, said, you need to always draw. He goes, I don't care what you do with it, but I'm giving you this book and I want you to draw. And so that was sort of my okay, I know that I'm going to do something. Of course, I thought it was going to be fashion design. I did all the fashion plates, and of course, I can't put together an outfit to save my life, which is kind of funny now that I think about it. But then I took one of the very first interior design courses. They were doing sort of a pilot program in the high schools. And I took one of the first ones at the high school I went to. And I went home after the first day and I said, Mom, this is what I'm going to do. I know what I'm going to do. And so it kind of just went from there. That was my sophomore year. I was the only girl that my CAD teacher had ever had in his CAD class in high school, which was kind of fun too, because I was then teaching all the guys how to do it right, which was kind of fun. So I just kind of, went from there. I've also learned that I think I've been fairly blessed to have the parents I have, because this was my plan A, B, C, D, E. I mean, it was it.
No other option.
There was no other option. And my parents just were like, okay, you're going to college for interior design. And I've been listening to other podcasts and things like that, where then you've heard people say, well, their parents said, no, you can't do that for a living. You won't make a living. And so that's sort of how they've come into it as a second or third career, where it's always been my just only sole focus. And I apparently am very blessed. I've learned that I had parents that supported that vision.
That's great.
During that time
so
period.
They were very supportive of your passion and what you wanted to do.
Yes.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So how would you describe your design style? I'm sure many interior designers have one way or another that they gear themselves towards as far as style, but you have to work with so many different clients that have so many different styles. So how do you adapt to that?
So I actually feel like clients were more, had more varied styles, probably about, maybe 10, 15 years ago, before the onset of Instagram, where you had, your magazines, but your magazines were really more varied, I believe, in style too. They reflected more across the country, more over the globe, and people didn't have this, or they couldn't see as much as what everybody else was doing. And so I think they really had their own mind and had their own personalities. And and then also, HGTV, you had your Candace Olsons, you had your Sarah Richardsons, and when you watch those design shows, they did not work and say, I have this one style. They worked within their different clients' varied styles. So you did see that from the designers' shows and point of view there too. So I feel like Instagram has actually kind of, and Instagram, and then also the new sort of HGTV and the new home shows where they're the flippers, where the flippers are designing their own houses, and so you have one point of view because they're continuing doing house after house after house. And so people are seeing one point of view more than they're seeing, I feel like, varied point of views now. And so I think that's impacted the public where they're wanting that style, And so it is actually, I feel, harder to get people to understand that it's okay to have your own personal design style and to reflect that. So people will call me and they'll ask me that, and I'll say, no, I don't have one style that you have to work with. I like to work within any style, but I do probably have a traditional foundation. So no matter what I do, if it's contemporary or whatever style you want to say, bohemian or whatever, it's going to have that very sort of traditional, timeless base to it, and then I'll build up from there.
Okay, so a good mix. That's good. Yeah. Now, I'm sure the next question that you get a lot is about budget.
Yes.
You ask it, or that you guys talk about it. So how do you handle budget considerations for people when they're coming to hire you as an interior designer?
Okay. So you do ask, because I like to talk about that right out of the gate and get that discussion going. So there aren't any surprises, and it's more enjoyable to go through the process. However, most of the clients, I would say at least 70 to 80%, when they call me, have never worked with a designer before, so they don't understand what it costs to completely finish out a room. And so I will, you have your historical data where you kind of see what your clients have spent for the last, say, 12 months on a project, if it's a bedroom. And you'll say, okay, so historically my clients have spent, $20,000 to $30,000 or whatever. And then also I have put together what I call the budget guides for all the main rooms in the house. And I have what's called the good, better, best. And I will tell them, first of all, we're not going to sell you anything that is an IKEA-based product because we are the retailer and we, take liability for that. So we want to make sure what we sell you has a base level of quality to it. But I tell them, based on that, tell me maybe what you're looking at doing, and I will send you one of our budget guides, and you can kind of pull together the different pieces that you think you're going to be purchasing, and then it will help you to kind of get an idea and a grasp on what you're going to spend on a room with us.
That's really good, because you're right. I mean, a lot of people don't know what is entailed when it comes to working with an interior designer, and of course what it would cost. So the fact that you can provide something like that to give kind of people a baseline,
it's been very helpful. Yeah.
So then they can get a general idea at the get-go, kind of what are they anticipating that they're going to be spending. So that's really good.
Right.
Now, getting back to the design style and visions, and you touched on it just a little bit, but how do you bring your clients' visions to life? Like, how do you go about when you meet with your clients? They say, I like this style, or they might have specific pieces that they really like. How do you, as an interior designer, bring that client's vision to fruition?
So I ask them to sort of do a couple different exercises before I come. One, I'll say, pull together kind of 3 piles of things in your home, what you have to keep, what you don't want to keep, and things that don't matter. I will ask them to have an inspiration photos for me, but I do remind them, I said, this is inspiration. We're not going to completely replicate something that you see. And I try to remind them that you need to kind of think in mind that you've got your own style. Your husband probably has a different idea and a different style somewhere along the way, if it doesn't completely diverge, which many times it does. And then your house also has its own personality. So a lot of times people will maybe want to do something very contemporary and they bought a traditional house. And I try to remind them, it's not going to work that well if you try to completely ignore what your house also kind of already has in mind for itself. So then based on that, I really just try and pull out of them you know, things that they've always liked, things that have always been their style, been what they've loved. Maybe they've always loved green granite, you know, even if it's in or not. What have you always loved? You know, there's things that are timeless all the time, but then there's things that's completely timeless to that particular individual, and no matter what the trend is, they're going to always love it. So,
and I think people might have a hard time with that too, as far as the trends and, you know, wanting to go with trends, but they really like something else. And it's like, you know, it's your house, you have to live in it. You know, go with what you like and don't necessarily follow the trends. Don't feel like, oh, like you mentioned green granite. Don't feel bad if you like something that might seem like it's, you know, old or traditional, and they might feel like they need to go another direction.
right.
I think it's important to make people understand, do what you love.
Do what you love. You're always going to love it. And that way your house will always reflect who you are. So, which you also have to keep in mind too. I always ask them as well, you know, how long are you going to live here? Are you going to live here for 5 years, or is this your forever home? Because that also plays into effect with the green granite thing. If you're going to sell your house in 5 years, maybe you don't want to do that.
Might not love
right.
it.
Yeah. So there's a balance, and you have to keep in mind the balance. And so, but that's part of the reason why they hire you, to help them do that. So.
Exactly. Now I want to talk about design challenges. I'm sure the fact that you've been in this business for so long, there's been a few.
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted you to give an example or two of a design challenge that you may have had, and how did you remedy that situation with your client?
Okay. One of the most recent ones, I would say, was we were remodeling a bathroom for a client, and she had the bones in place. She had done the remodel probably on her own without any assistance a few years prior, but she had crema marfil, and which, you know, back in the day was a popular surface in bathrooms. So she wanted to keep this foundation tile that she had, and she had attempted to work with it with dark chocolate browns and things like that, but it was too heavy of a contrast. So she wanted to update it, but how do we update it but still keep it? And so many times what I find is, if you lean into something that you don't like but you have to keep, it usually works out a lot better if you embrace it than if you try to fight it. And so we really just sort of leaned into it and said, okay, well, maybe crema marfil isn't the in finish, but blush and your pinks are sort of coming in. So let's, you know, bring it in, build it in with your warmer grays that will still work with this color. I found a tile that actually brought in your crema marfil and also brought in some of your gray tiles as well in a mosaic, and that was sort of a inspiration to pull it all together. And so I just find, you know, that's not always the case, but if you can and if it will work, just don't fight it. If you lean in and embrace it, many times it'll work better.
Sometimes that's hard for people, though.
It is. It's very hard.
Because if they have their mindset on, I do not like this, it's kind of hard to, like you said, embrace it if it's already something in their mind that they really don't like it. That's hard.
That's true. Well, that's sort of when you kind of then have to have the conversation and say, we need to talk about, you know, setting expectations. Because if you want to keep this, but you want to change styles completely, you can't. I had another client who had a fireplace that they had remodeled with another designer. It was terrible. And they said, but, you know, we spent all the money on it. We want this particular look, but we don't want to redo this. I said, well, I understand that. And I would like to work with it. But I said, I also feel like I need to, before either one of us, you know, moves further, we need to set expectations. You need to understand that if we use this, it's not going to have the outcome that you want. No matter what I do, the outcome won't work. So sometimes it will work, and sometimes you embrace it and you can make it happen. Sometimes you have to know, hey, it's not going to work, and then let's set the expectation that you're okay with it. It's not going to work, or you want the best results, and then we need to have that conversation too. So.
Now, on that same note, I'm going to ask you another question, which I didn't prompt you to prior. I always ask this question about horror stories that you might have. So give us a good example of a good horror story, because as you know, in interior design and construction and all that, there are many of those. So what is a good horror story that you can share for entertainment value?
Entertainment value. Okay, so there was a neighborhood early on in my career that I had just been dying to get into. And so I had a client walk into the store that I was working at, and she lived in that neighborhood, and I was like, yay, I get my first client in this neighborhood. I'm excited. And it was a sweet couple. I love her to death. But we got to her house, and she loved mint green and purple. And as big of a balloon and as much lace and as much frill as you could possibly get. And so that has ended up being the project that we did. I mean, I couldn't fight her. That's what she wanted. And it wasn't about what I wanted.
Yeah.
It's about what she wanted in her home. And so we had to keep her purple and mint green tile and her big balloon silk green and purple and mauve and lace everywhere from the kitchen to the master bedroom to the husband's home office. And so we did it, and she was happy. She loved it, but then, she wanted to have an open house. And okay, she insisted that I go, and so I went, and I had a lovely time, but of course she told everybody in the neighborhood who came that I was the designer that helped her with that house. Mm-hmm. And so I never got another job in that neighborhood again.
Oh, no.
So, again, it wasn't necessarily her fault. I loved her, and it was great. But, that's again where, you
following what the
client
wants. Not necessary. Oh, yeah. And you said that was early in your career?
That was early in my career. That was probably in the first 5 years where I was actually an interior designer. I mean, I had other parts of the career, but then my first years as a designer. Yeah.
So I'm guessing probably if it was today, you would probably handle that situation a little bit differently, maybe? Or no, you would still keep up with going with what they want?
I would still go what they want. In my opinion, I feel like it is my job to go in there and see if I can make the client's house better. Mm-hmm. Of course, I want to have the portfolio pieces, and I want to do all that like all the other designers do. But first and foremost, I try to remember that my job is to go in and to make my client's dream house come true. Mm-hmm. And if I can do that, and if I can, like I said, make their house better, if I can do my best job as a designer, then that is my job. My job is not to go in and put my personal stamp on it and make it mine and make sure that I can photograph the house. Mm-hmm. So I would still do it.
That's good.
Yeah.
I love that. Now, what would you think now would be the biggest misconception that public has about interior designers? So I'm sure there's some. Like, what do you feel like as an interior designer people don't really understand about what you do or don't do? What is your opinion on that?
Gosh, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. I think one of the most interesting that I found COVID has brought about is that it used to be that people thought that designers were or maybe understood that designers were more of a luxury business commodity. Where COVID, I feel, has sort of turned it around, and we get a lot of people calling. And it may not be fair to say that it was just COVID. I feel like maybe a lot of the Havenleys, a lot of those who make design, you can get a design plan for $500. They have made it maybe more accessible to where clients will call and feel like they should be able to hire a designer. When they find out what it costs to have a designer, they get a little offended. They get a little upset because they feel that they should be able to afford a designer at any level, and that it isn't a luxury service anymore. So I feel like that's one that has sort of surprised me, that has sort of turned around where you sort of have to educate them that no, this is a luxury business. If you want it done right and you don't want just, here you go, I've spent 10 minutes on it and it doesn't matter to me if it fits who you are and what your lifestyle is. Design takes time. So
yeah, and there's a difference between, an interior designer that went to school for it and is, licensed and studied and did all that, as opposed to somebody who's like just a decorator. Right? And I don't think a lot of people understand that aspect of it either.
True.
Because in my mind, I've seen that a lot of people do consider themselves as an interior designer, but they don't have the educational backing or experience, but they would be more considered a decorator where they're calling themselves an interior designer. So, and I think that too confuses people.
It does. It does.
So they might not understand the value of what an actual interior designer can bring to them.
Not only the public, but also your home owner, your stay-at-home mom turned designer. And then there's nothing wrong with that if you're willing to put the effort, the education and stuff going in, and if you understand that it is a more than going shopping and it's more than just a glamorous field. But yeah, I remember going to market and approaching a vendor, and a vendor who didn't used to sell to designers and now did, but they had parameters in place. They said because they had a lot of the stay-at-home mom turned designer after Harvey. And so they thought, well, I can do this, and they don't understand, let's say, the logistics of buying furniture and what it takes to, just the purchasing, and the getting it to the client, and that's 90% of what we do, right? It's, sure, we sell it, but then after that, we have to project manage it and make sure that all it is just the logistics work. And so they, I think a lot of the people who dream about being an interior designer, I wouldn't say don't do it, but do understand that it's there's a lot of hard work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not picking up some pillows and a rug.
Exactly.
That's for sure. No, I mean, I am highly impressed with what you guys do because it's hard. I mean, I'm in construction and that's hard, but interior design work is difficult. So kudos to you guys.
Thank you.
Now, what kind of advice would you give to someone who's looking to hire an interior designer? What steps should they take to find one that's the right fit? So for anybody watching, what would be your suggestion on what is the right way to go about finding the right interior designer for them?
I think one thing I don't think you have to be referral based. It does help because if you know somebody who's used a designer, then you will know, is this the designer that's going to listen to me, or is this a designer that's more interested in getting what they want out of the project? You have two kinds, and if you're just looking for a house that's magazine worthy, and that is the most important thing, and it can be for some home owners, and there's nothing wrong with that, then finding that designer who does just that one look and is purely focused on getting a magazine worthy home, and that is their end game, then that's the designer for you. If you're somebody who's looking for more of, I've got these pieces that I want to continue to use, then you need to make sure that you ask the designer, hey, are you willing to work with the pieces that I have and incorporate around them as well? Because some designers want to do whole rooms and some designers are open to incorporating and using both. So you really need to first, I think, sit down and figure out what your goals are and what you want before you go and talk to another designer, and make sure that you're able to stand firm on what it is you're looking for and not kind of talked into maybe something else because you're not sure. Also, make sure that person can do what they say they can do with the whole age of AI. And I am not a tech person. I am not very AI fluent, let's put it that way. But I have been hearing and understanding that some clients have fallen trap to designers who have used AI to fill their Instagram.
Oh.
And so that is actually not their work. It was an AI developed Instagram post. And so then they've hired the designer, and the designer actually doesn't have the experience and the skill to do what their post says they can do. So kind of be wary, I think, of that new trap that's out there now.
Yeah, because that's scary for a lot of industries, right? Things can be out there with this AI, and you don't know if you're going to actually get what you're looking at.
Get what you're talking about.
Yeah. Get what you pay for.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So no, that's interesting. Well, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming and talking to me and giving your professional insights as an interior designer. I appreciate it so much. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, well, that's it for this episode, and stay tuned for the next one. Bye.